100 million people. That's how many Chinese citizens may not actually exist, at least not according to independent researchers who've exposed Beijing's population lies. But that's just the beginning. Because when a government lies about something as basic as how many people live in their country, what else are they hiding? The answer will shock you. From pandemic cover-ups that cost millions of lives to economic statistics that make Bernie Madoff look honest, China has built an empire of deception so vast, so systematic, that it threatens the foundation of global trust. Today, we're exposing 12 lies that reveal the true face of the Chinese Communist Party and why every promise, every statistic, every guarantee from Beijing should be met with one simple response: never again. Let's start with the missing millions, because they expose how China operates. Lie number 1, the population phantom. For years, Beijing claimed their population stood at around 1.41 billion people. World leaders made policies based on this number. Companies invested trillions. The UN shaped global strategies around China's massive demographic weight, all built on a lie. Dr. Yi Fuzhan, a demographer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, spent years analyzing China's census data. What he discovered should terrify anyone who relies on Chinese statistics for anything. China has been systematically over-reporting its population by more than 100 million people. A statistical black hole, enough missing people to populate a whole nation, conjured out of bureaucratic ambition. That's more than the population of Germany, erased on paper. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Yi pointed out that between 1991 and 2000, China reported 203 million births, but closer analysis showed only 164.24 million babies were actually born, a gap of nearly 40 million people in just one decade. The Chinese government has been caught red-handed inflating its numbers to maintain the illusion of demographic dominance. Local officials face financial incentives to over-report population figures, creating a systematic web of deception that reaches from the village level all the way to Beijing. But the cover-up goes deeper. When the National Bureau of Statistics reported 9.02 million births in 2023, the state-owned Mother and Infant Daily News Service reported only 7.88 million births for the same year. The report was promptly censored following publication. Even their own media can't keep the lie straight. And the implications? From military planners to global markets, everyone has been calculating based on a number that never existed. The United Nations itself has been fooled with population projections that experts now say are wildly exaggerated. But if they'll lie about their own people, what won't they lie about? The answer brings us to perhaps the most deadly deception of all. Lie number 2, the COVID catastrophe. Remember early 2020, when the world was scrambling to understand a mysterious virus spreading from Wuhan? China told us they had everything under control. They said human-to-human transmission was limited. They claimed their response was transparent and comprehensive. Each phrase was a brick in the wall of silence that sealed Wuhan off from the world. China swiftly arrested doctors and whistleblowers, ordered labs to transfer or destroy any related viral samples, and refused to provide key data to international investigators. When the World Health Organization requested to audit the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Beijing simply said no. But here's what really happened behind the scenes, and this should chill you to the bone. A few months before the acknowledged outbreak in December 2019, several researchers inside the WIV were said to have become sick. The lab changed its security protocols, ordered an expensive new air incinerator and ventilation system, and mysteriously took down an online database of 22,000 bat virus samples in the middle of the night. That's not the behavior of a transparent government dealing with a natural outbreak. That's a cover-up operation. While people were dying around the world, China was busy spinning an elaborate misinformation campaign. Chinese state media pushed misleading narratives, with officials like Hua Chunying reviving conspiracy theories and calling for more transparency around the network of 200-plus overseas biolabs, without ever addressing the lack of access to Wuhan's early outbreak data. Beijing even went so far as to suggest the virus emerged in Italy, misconstruing research to deflect blame anywhere but themselves. Meanwhile, they were deleting crucial early data and blocking international investigators from accessing key evidence. The most recent CIA assessment? The agency now believes with low confidence that the pandemic resulted from a laboratory incident, though China's refusal to share evidence continues to stymie any definitive conclusion. 4 years later, we still don't have the samples, the lab records, or the blood tests that could answer the most important question of our time. Lives shattered, economies buckled, millions dead, all while Beijing pointed fingers at everyone else. But wait, it gets worse. Because when a regime will cover up a global pandemic, erasing their own history becomes child's play. Lie number 3. The Tiananmen Memory Hole. June 4th, 1989, Tiananmen Square. Hundreds, possibly thousands, of peaceful pro-democracy protesters gunned down by the People's Liberation Army. You know this happened. The world knows this happened. There's photographic evidence, video footage, eyewitness accounts. According to China, it never happened. In the 36 years since the crackdown, all discussion of the incident has been heavily censored in China, as authorities have effectively attempted to erase it from history. Public commemoration or mere mention, online or off, of the Tiananmen crackdown is banned. This isn't just historical revisionism, it's active, ongoing persecution of families who lost children. The Tiananmen mothers, family members of victims, are escorted by police to private memorial events under the government's stability maintenance system that controls the words and movements of anyone they think might cause trouble for authorities. But here's how deep the censorship goes. Every year leading up to the anniversary, China ramps up VPN shutdowns, activist arrests, digital surveillance, and social media censorship. In 2019, popular video platforms suspended all comments for system maintenance, while WeChat blocked users from changing profile pictures. Even the number 64, or images of candles, are scrubbed from Chinese social media. Chinese internet users have had to resort to coded language like May 35th to reference June 4th, only to have those codes banned as well. The censorship is so thorough that young Chinese grow up completely unaware of what happened in their own capital. Here's what that really means. A government so afraid of their own history that they'll arrest people for lighting candles or changing their profile picture on the wrong day. Some activists have been detained simply for posting photos of empty squares or sharing poetry that might reference the massacre. And this is the regime that wants us to trust their word on everything else? The scary part, their lies about the past pale in comparison to how they're deceiving people about the present. Lie number 4, the prosperity mirage. China loves to showcase gleaming skyscrapers, bullet trains, and bustling cities as proof of their economic miracle. But behind the glossy propaganda lies a devastating truth about who's actually benefiting from China's growth. Ready for this? According to some estimates, only about 200 million Chinese citizens enjoy middle-class lifestyles, while over 1 billion remain poor, exploited, and excluded from rights and services. Now imagine the scale we're talking about. In a country that Beijing claims has lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, more than 70% of the population is still struggling. The Communist Party has created a two-tier system where a select few in major cities live comfortable lives, while the vast majority, farmers, migrant workers, rural families, are treated as second-class citizens in their own country. But here's the twisted part. China uses the prosperity of those 200 million to justify the oppression of the other billion plus. Mass rural protests, tens of thousands per year, are often brutally suppressed, while dissidents are silenced, imprisoned, or harassed. The stable China we see in international media, it's maintained through systematic violence against anyone who dares to protest their conditions. So when Chinese officials talk about their economic success story, remember, they're talking about less than 15% of their own people. What about the other 85%? They don't count. And speaking of people who don't count, let's talk about what happens when you try to practice faith in the People's Republic. Lie number 5, the religious freedom fraud. China's constitution guarantees freedom of religion. It's written right there in black and white. But if you actually try to practice religion in China, good luck. Non-sanctioned religious groups like Falun Gong face persecution, evangelicals operate underground, and even bishops like Joseph Zen are pressured by authorities. This isn't subtle discrimination. This is systematic persecution designed to crush any belief system that isn't controlled by the Communist Party. Want to be a Christian? You can only attend state-approved churches where sermons are monitored and cross-wearing is sometimes forbidden. Want to practice Buddhism? Only the government-sanctioned version. Independent religious thought? Forget about it. Chinese authorities enforce comprehensive suppression, with churches being shut down and religious leaders detained for refusing to submit to state control. The most chilling part? They don't just target religious leaders, they go after entire communities. Families are torn apart. Children are separated from their parents, all for the crime of believing in something the party doesn't approve of. And then Chinese diplomats stand at international forums and talk about religious tolerance with straight faces. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. But if you think religious persecution is shocking, wait until you hear about what they did to their own families. Lie number 6, the one-child horror show. For decades, China marketed their one-child policy as a humane necessity for population control. The reality was a campaign of brutality that would make authoritarian regimes blush. Extreme abuses, including forced abortions and sterilizations, occurred regularly, with 130,000 targeted in Linyi in 2005 alone. Here's what that really means. Chinese authorities would literally drag pregnant women from their homes, force them to undergo abortions even in the final months of pregnancy, and sterilize them against their will. This wasn't population control. It was a war on mothers, waged with surgical gloves and shackles. But China didn't just commit these atrocities. They lied about them to the world. They portrayed the one-child policy as a voluntary, civilized approach to demographic management while running what amounted to detention camps for pregnant women. The psychological trauma alone has scarred an entire generation of Chinese families. Parents were forced to choose which child to keep. Women were tortured for the crime of wanting a second baby. Fathers powerless to protect their families from state violence. And the long-term consequences? China now faces a demographic collapse that threatens their entire economic model, the direct result of their own brutal policies. But instead of taking responsibility, Beijing quietly ended the one-child policy and pretended the horror stories never happened. Now here's where it gets really dangerous for the rest of us, because all of these domestic lies are just practice for the big deception. Lie number 7, the statistics sham. When China reports economic data, the world markets move. Investment decisions worth trillions of dollars are made based on Chinese government statistics. There's just one problem. Those numbers are heavily manipulated. While China claimed annual growth rates around 10% during its economic boom in the 2000s and continues to report official unemployment at around 3.5%, today's reality paints a more complex picture. Independent experts estimate the current GDP growth is closer to 5%, while overall unemployment is roughly 5%, and youth unemployment, particularly among recent graduates, is believed to exceed 20%. This isn't a minor discrepancy. This is systematic statistical fraud on a global scale. Think about it. If a corporation cooked their books like this, executives would go to prison. But when China does it, the international community just shrugs and moves on. The unemployment situation is particularly devastating. Among college graduates, unemployment rates may reach 20%, creating a massive population of educated, frustrated young people with no economic prospects. But Beijing can't admit this reality because it would shatter the illusion of the Chinese economic miracle. So they keep lying, and international investors keep believing. The result? A house of cards built on fabricated statistics that could collapse at any moment, taking the global economy with it. And here's the most disturbing part. China's National Bureau of Statistics has been caught multiple times releasing contradictory data, with different government agencies reporting wildly different numbers for the same metrics. When confronted, officials simply change the methodology or claim data revisions without explanation. Independent economists estimate that China's real GDP growth has been consistently overstated by 2 to 3 percentage points annually for over a decade. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between a growing economy and potential stagnation. How many more economic decisions will be made based on Beijing's fantasy numbers before the truth comes out? And while they're lying about economics, they're also spinning an equally massive deception about the environment. Lie number 8, the environmental deception. China loves to position itself as a climate leader. They sign international agreements, make grand promises about carbon neutrality, and lecture other countries about environmental responsibility. Meanwhile, back in China, the environmental catastrophe is beyond anything most people can imagine. Water scarcity, pollution, and lack of clean air affects hundreds of millions, while the regime prioritizes growth over life. Kids grow up coughing black, lungs scarred by the price of progress. But here's the really infuriating part. China aims to eliminate severe air pollution by the end of 2025, yet continues expanding fossil fuel infrastructure while making international climate commitments. They promise one thing to the world while doing the exact opposite at home. Despite pledges to peak emissions, China's actual emissions continue to rise as they build new coal plants while claiming to lead global climate action. The environmental promises aren't just empty, they're misleading, giving other countries false hope that China is part of the solution when it is actually the biggest part of the problem. Millions of Chinese citizens live with health consequences of this environmental negligence every single day. But as long as the economic growth continues and the party stays in power, Beijing considers that an acceptable trade-off. But perhaps nowhere is China's willingness to break promises more obvious than what they've done to Hong Kong. Lie number 9, the Hong Kong betrayal. One country, two systems. That was China's promise to Hong Kong when Britain handed over the territory in 1997. The deal was simple. Hong Kong would maintain its autonomy, its freedoms, its legal system until 2047. 50 years of guaranteed self-governance. Beijing couldn't even wait half that time before tearing up the agreement. China systematically undermines Hong Kong's autonomy by denying pro-democracy legislators entry, censoring movements, and blocking democratic reform. The 2020 national security law was the final nail in the coffin. Overnight, peaceful protest became sedition. Calling for democracy became subversion. Even singing certain songs could land you in prison. Once a bastion of free speech in Asia, now a silent city where dissent is measured in lumens. By 2024, police were warning people that having phone flashlights on while sitting alone on park benches could constitute sedition under new security laws. This is the level of paranoia and control China has imposed on what was once one of Asia's freest cities. But perhaps the most chilling part? In 2024, Hong Kong authorities changed the label of a lamppost from FA 8964 because it contained an accidental reference to the June 4, 1989 Tiananmen crackdown date. They're so terrified of even accidental reminders of their own history that they're literally renumbering lampposts. The message to Taiwan and the rest of the world is clear. Chinese promises mean nothing. Treaties are just paper. When Beijing wants something, international law becomes irrelevant. And if you're wondering how they keep their own people from learning about these broken promises, that brings us to perhaps their most sophisticated lie of all. Lie number 10, the internet illusion. China wants the world to believe their internet censorship is about maintaining social stability and protecting citizens from harmful content. The reality? They've built the most sophisticated digital surveillance and information control system in human history. Censorship software deletes posts instantly, while the digital space is tightly monitored and censored across all platforms. We're not talking about blocking a few websites. This is total information control, where algorithms scan every message, every image, every video in real time to ensure nothing challenges the party narrative. The Great Firewall targets not just political content, but any discussion that might undermine state authority, with citizens unable to access basic information about their own history or current events. Think about living in a digital prison where your own government decides what you're allowed to know about the world, where searching for basic historical facts could get you arrested. But here's what makes it even more sinister. This isn't just silencing 1.4 billion people. It's algorithmic authoritarianism sold by the gigabyte. China exports this digital control system to every autocrat who will buy it. The internet freedom China promises is actually the freedom to think only what the government allows you to think, which brings us to the lie that could trigger the next world war. Lie number 11, the Taiwan threat. China's official position on Taiwan is crystal clear. They want peaceful reunification through dialogue and mutual respect. Their actual behavior tells a completely different story. Despite claims of seeking peaceful reunification, China continues military intimidation while building up forces specifically designed to invade Taiwan. Chinese military exercises around Taiwan have intensified dramatically, with warships and fighter jets conducting regular training that looks suspiciously like invasion rehearsals. The peaceful part of their reunification plan apparently involves surrounding Taiwan with missiles, conducting mock invasion exercises, and threatening any country that supports Taiwanese democracy. But China maintains this fiction of peaceful intentions because it serves their strategic goals. They can build up military pressure while claiming they're the reasonable party seeking dialogue. Meanwhile, 23 million Taiwanese people live under the constant threat of invasion from a neighbor that refuses to accept their right to self-determination. The pattern is clear. China promises peace while preparing for war. They offer dialogue while building the military capability to make dialogue irrelevant. When the invasion comes, and many experts believe it's a matter of when, not if, Beijing will claim they tried peaceful reunification and Taiwan forced their hand, just like they've done with every other broken promise. Now you might be wondering, what connects all these deceptions? What's the master plan behind this empire of lies? The final truth, the pattern revealed. So what do all these lies have in common? What's the underlying strategy that connects population fraud to pandemic cover-ups to environmental deception? Control. Absolute, total control of information, perception, and narrative. China doesn't just lie about specific issues. They've weaponized dishonesty as a tool of statecraft. Every false statistic, every denied atrocity, and every broken promise serves the same goal: maintaining the Communist Party in power at any cost. But here's what makes this truly dangerous for the rest of the world. China's lies don't stay within their borders. When they fabricate economic data, global markets react. When they cover up health crises, pandemics spread. When they break international agreements, the entire system of global governance becomes meaningless. We're not just dealing with a dishonest government. We're dealing with a regime that has weaponized deception as their primary export. And the most terrifying part? They're getting away with it. World leaders still meet with Chinese officials who lie to their faces. International organizations still accept Chinese data despite knowing it's fabricated. Corporations still invest billions based on promises that everyone knows are worthless. The question isn't whether China will continue lying. They will. The question is whether the rest of the world will finally stop pretending to believe them. And it spirals even further. Every time we accept another fabricated statistic, every time we ignore another broken promise, every time we shake hands with officials who deny their own history, we become complicit in the deception. China has shown us exactly who they are through decades of systematic dishonesty. They've told us they can't be trusted through their own actions. The evidence is overwhelming. The pattern is undeniable. They've told us who they are. It's time the world stopped pretending otherwise. The next time you hear a Chinese official making promises about trade, climate, human rights, or peace, remember these 12 lies. Remember the 100 million people who don't exist. Remember the pandemic cover-up. Remember Tiananmen Square. And ask yourself, why would this time be any different? The Chinese Communist Party has built their entire system on the foundation that truth is whatever serves their power. They've shown us repeatedly that no promise is too sacred to break, no fact too basic to fabricate, no atrocity too horrific to deny. So what do you think? Have we reached the point where the world should stop taking Chinese promises at face value? Should international agreements with Beijing include verification mechanisms that assume deception rather than good faith? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe to Fall of Nations for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world.